When it comes to quality sleep, Ashley has you covered with top mattress brands at winning prices and with special financing options available. You can snooze now and pay later. Plus, your mattress purchase helps give the gift of better sleep to children in need and U.S. Special Operations Forces. Visit your local Ashley store or shop online today and make every snooze count. Financing is subject to credit approval. See store or ashley.com for details.
Dreaming of overseas adventures or connecting more deeply with family from afar? Rosetta Stone bridges the language gap.
I've tried others, but Rosetta Stone's immersive lessons and voice feedback technology are game changers.
Dive into 25 languages by learning intuitively, just like when you were a kid. And here's the holiday sparkle. Grab a lifetime membership now and save 50%. Gift yourself the world. Head to rosettastone.com now and save 50%.
Welcome to True Crime Garage. Wherever you are, whatever you are doing, thanks for listening. I'm your host, Nick, and with me, as always, is a man that, just like Michael Jordan, he knows the ceiling is the roof. He is the captain.
What? It's good to be seen, and it's good to see you.
This week, we are very happy to be drinking Tweak Bourbon Barrel Aged Stout by Avery Brewing Company. Garage grade. 4.5 bottle caps out of 5. Check out this American Imperial Double Stout. I drank a few of these on Friday, checking out some new games with some friends. And because of the high ABV, it's a 17.5%. Well, forget about driving because I couldn't even read after a couple of these. So be very aware, friends.
You normally can't read anyways.
Either way, you're going to love this strong boozy stout with coffee added, aged in bourbon barrels from the very cool people at Avery Brewing. And Tweak was brought to us by these very cool people. First up, we have Jillian in Austin, Texas. Next, we have Jake from State Farm in good old Cleveland, Ohio.
Well, she sounds hideous.
Well, she's a man. Also, we have Jennifer who says cheers from Boston.
Yo, where you parked the car, Bobo?
Next, let's give a very long distance cheers to Martha all the way in Korea.
Martha Stewart.
Let's go up north and say hi to Mickey's Tackle Box, who says, your podcast helps me forget that I'm freezing my jib off while I'm walking my cold Canadian mail route. For some reason, Captain, I'm not sure why, but we have a ton of mailmen that seem to listen to the show. So a big shout out to the mail carriers everywhere. Keep your jib warm.
And from Harleysville, Pennsylvania, J&T, they want us to do Richard Ramirez.
We get a lot of Richard Ramirez request episodes.
Aren't you afraid of Richard?
He's one of the guys that I'm afraid of, yes. And last but not least, we have Wyatt in Jacksonville who says, I'm buying only a beer for the captain. So thanks, Wyatt. I guess I'm just going to sit here and watch the captain drink.
Yeah, why don't you just sit over there and sit on your goddamn thumbs?
Yeah, so thanks a lot, Wyatt.
Thanks to everybody that donated. Like always, we like y'all, G.
And maybe you'd like to buy us a beer or two for next week's show. If so, go to truecrimegarage.com, click on the donate button.
And maybe you just want to send me beers and leave Nick out. It's not like you host the show.
I'm starving over here.
I'm starving for beer. And for social media, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, Instagram, all that stuff. Untapped at True Crime Garage.
All right, everybody gather around, grab a chair, grab a beer, and let's talk some true crime.
In 1985, hunters found a large metal drum in Allenstown's Bear Brook State Park. Then, in 2000, the second drum was found by Cody. In all, 4 unidentified victims, a woman, 2 girls related to her, and another girl were found inside.
The 2 to 3 year old's little girl that looks like a brick has been used to smash her head in.
Retired New Hampshire State Police Detective John Cody vividly remembers the moment when he stumbled upon a rusty metal drum, 2 bodies stuffed inside.
I took my flashlight and looked in, and you could see there was something white inside the plastic bag, so I peeled back a little of the plastic bag, and that's when you could see that there was bones in there.
And Lisa, that's why investigators want to come back here to search the very same spot in the spring where the bodies of a woman and 3 girls were found. They're also hoping all this media coverage will help bring their loved ones forward.
November 10, 1985, there's this little town in New Hampshire called Allenstown. Mm-hmm. And in 85, the population was less than 4,000 people. In Allenstown, we have the Bear Brook State Park. So on that November day, there's 2 brothers. They're out hunting. This, of course, would be deer hunting season. And they're on the outskirts of the Bear Brook State Park.
You say, of course. Like you're the best hunter in the world.
I'm constantly scouting.
He's an avid hunter, people.
This is off of a wooded trail, which is off of Everwood Drive. These 2 brothers spot a bunch of trash, and amongst the trash is a tarp. The tarp is covering something. So under the tarp, they discover a barrel, and it's lying on its side. This is one of those big 55-gallon metal drums. You know, I've seen pictures of this site, and the barrel appears to be like a dark blue or maybe even a black color. I'm sure everyone's familiar with these types of barrels.
And the barrel that the hunters find, it's sealed.
Yeah, and the 2 brothers, they decide that they're going to investigate. So, of course, they open up the barrel. Inside, they find trash bags. And inside one of those trash bags, they find remains. These are human remains. So, technically, this barrel is found on private property. On this property, there had once been a camp store that had operated for the park goers of Bear Brook State Park. This was called the Bear Brook Store. But this small store burned in July of 1983. So now it's just a shell of the store that remained. So on this private property, basically the whole place kind of looks like a dump, in my opinion. It has been described as having a small burnt building, which was the store, a mobile home, a camper, several broken down vehicles, several barrels, and appliances that were scattered on the grounds of this property. Back then, the Allenstown Police Department was run by Chief Norm Connor.
And like you said, this is a very small community.
Yeah, small population. So, of course, the police department is very small, and they certainly are limited as far as investigative resources goes. So, Chief Connor brings in the state police to assist in the investigation. Back then, this may sound crazy today, but back then, New Hampshire didn't even have a medical examiner's office. So the remains were flown to Maine to be examined. Once in Maine, what they discovered in regards to the human remains in the barrel was that they were actually 2 sets of remains stuffed into the barrel, wrapped in these trash bags. We now know that we have the remains of 2 females. We have the remains of an adult woman and a young girl. The girl probably not even old enough to be like a teenager. They do the tough work, and they put together a sketch of the woman and a sketch of the girl. They release these sketches to the media and to the public in hopes that someone would recognize these 2 and put names to these bodies. Obviously, when you have a victim or victims, usually you have means of identifying the victim. Sometimes you'll find identifiers with the body, like a photo ID, credit card, driver's license, something with a name and or a face on it. Or you have family, friends, or neighbors that can identify a body. So you start by making an identification to the victims, and then once you have that established, you can start investigation by interviewing the persons in the victim's inner circle.
Right.
Usually that will provide you with, the victim's timeline. Who were they last with? Where were they last seen? What were they doing the day they went missing?
Yeah, or in this case, did they have a husband or a boyfriend, or they normally look at that first.
Yeah, what were they planning to do? Do they have any enemies? Unfortunately, we have a situation here where we have no identifiers. We have decomposed remains. So you're left with creating and releasing sketches.
Yeah, it's a sketch that you don't even know how clear the sketch is. And this is also before the technology that they had where they'd take the DNA to reconstruct, like a drawing or an image of the person.
So without victims' names and knowing very little about these people, we have no inner circle to interview. Hell, we have no circle at all, basically.
Right.
One possibility being here that the remains are related, that the grown woman could be the mother of the girl that was found with her. That was certainly a possibility and something that investigators were considering as they try to put names to these bodies.
So they don't know who these people are or who the victims are. So you'd think at some point they'd have to start looking in that area for possible missing persons and maybe trying to connect the dots that way.
Yeah, and that's one thing that they were able to cover a lot of ground on. They were able to eliminate persons as not being the identities of the bodies found.
Right.
However, of course, they were unable to actually identify the bodies. The investigative efforts did not lead to answers, and eventually the two bodies were released for burial. The Allenstown police chief, Connor, he organized a graveside service complete with a priest and a minister because they didn't know what religion these people could be. So, we got to, I give a little applause there to the police chief for doing right by the people that were found, these unknown victims.
Yeah, but they might not have wanted a priest or a pastor or anybody.
Of course, but they didn't want to be in a barrel either.
Right.
So the two were buried together in a single steel casket. And this was kind of a well thought out plan as far as their burial goes, because the thought was that if they ever needed to exhume the bodies, this would make that whole process a lot easier.
Right.
They were buried in St. John Baptist Cemetery, and it's a local company, the Epsom Memorials Service. They donated a granite stone complete with a carved rose and a picture of a woman and a child holding hands. The reading on the stone is pretty vague because, again, not knowing who these people are, but it starts off saying, "Here lies the mortal remains known only to God of a woman and a girl."
All right, so we know it's a woman and we know it's a girl, but what else do we know? Do we know anything?
Okay, so both are female victims. They're both found November 10th, 1985. And we will refer to the grown woman as victim number 1. So in 1985, this is what we can tell you about victim number 1. She was a Caucasian female, approximately 23 to 33 years of age. She was approximately 5'4" to 5'7" tall. She was about 120 to 140 pounds. She had shoulder-length brown hair, and she has had some dental work done. She had 3 fillings, and she is missing some of her teeth. Investigators believe that she had been bludgeoned to death. She is listed as UP number 2174 with the NamUs organization. Now we have the girl as well, and we will call her victim number 2. She too is...
And for people that don't know what NamUs is?
NamUs is an organization where they try to identify the remains, unknown remains that are found. And they keep a big catalog of those, and they can be accessed somewhat by the public, but mainly it's for law enforcement resources.
Yeah, so like Jane Does and John Does.
So the girl, we'll call her victim number 2. She too is a Caucasian female, believed to be between the ages of 5 and 11. She would have been somewhere in the area of 4'2", maybe 4'4" tall, and weighing 65 to 85 pounds. She too had brown hair. This is believed to be collar length hair. She has both of her ears pierced, with 2 piercings each, so double pierced ears. And she is listed as UP number 2173 with NamUs. So both were believed to have been bludgeoned to death. Both were dismembered, and basically they're stuffed into this barrel and thrown out like trash. The investigation, as far as the investigation goes, let's go through this. I believe, and I think that you'll agree with me, that police really did try everything that they could think of at the time. So in the beginning of this investigation, the New Hampshire State Police started off by sifting through missing people cases from the 70s and the 80s.
Right.
Okay. But of course, they were unable to identify these bodies. In 1986, the New Hampshire State Police, they get a strong lead, and they actually believed that this lead was going to solve the case. So this is when they suspected 2 missing people named Grace Reeb and her 5-year-old daughter, Gracie, as being the unidentified bodies in the barrel.
Which would fit with the ages of the victims that we have.
Yeah, it was a very strong lead, but unfortunately the dental records proved that the unidentified remains were not those of Grace and her daughter, Gracie.
In 1985, with a small town, you'd assume this would be big news.
Well, yes, of course it was, and that's one thing that they used to try to help gather leads regarding the identities of these 2 people. They received hundreds of leads, and they distributed composite drawings of the victims throughout the northeastern part of the United States and actually all the way up into Quebec, Canada. Several people in Allenstown said that the unidentified adult woman resembled someone who had left town with several children a few years ago, but this actually proved to be a dead end as well, because later this woman was found alive in Arizona with her children.
You would assume that there'd be a lot of dead ends in this case.
Yeah, and one more that we run into here is, out of a lot of those leads that the New Hampshire State Police received, there was a lead about a mother and a daughter who had vanished from an Indian reservation in Maine. Not only did the descriptions match the victims found in the barrel, but also the time of their disappearance seemed to match up perfectly with this whole case. But here is just another case where the mother and the daughter were actually located alive, and they were found to be living just in some other town in Maine.
And you would assume at this, maybe not assume, but it's 1985, so it's more likely that we would have these mothers that were taking their kids to get away from a maybe abusive husband or something, and maybe just didn't want to be found.
And sometimes people have little to no ties to where they live at all, and maybe someone goes and takes a job elsewhere and decides to up and move with their children, and they have no parents local to notify that we've moved.
Yeah, or maybe you get like a really good offer to move to parts unknown and do a local podcast there, and maybe jump ship,
Well, we are selling plots of land in parts unknown.
Tents.
And they are filling up fast, so make sure you reserve yours today.
Use promo code GARAGE.
But I know that these were all kind of dead-end leads here, but we wanted to include these because I didn't want it to make it sound like, the police couldn't identify these people, so they just kind of sat around. It wasn't that case at all. They're pouring through missing persons cases. They're checking the databases that are available at the time, and they're going out and physically looking for these people to determine if they match up or not. And again, receiving leads and following up on these leads. So I see a situation here where we have a police chief of a very small police department. I think he does the right thing by immediately bringing in the New Hampshire State Police.
Yeah. Always a good thing.
Yeah, exactly. Bring in these people that have the resources, that have the funding, and have the manpower or woman power to do the hard work.
Well, here's what gets me is just imagine, first of all, just go back to the hunters.
Yeah.
Right? You're a hunter. You're hanging out with your brother. Do people drink beer when they hunt?
I think some people do.
Yeah, I've been shooting and stuff, but I'm not a hunter myself. But so you find this barrel. One, I don't think I'd have the guts to open the damn thing.
Yeah, you made a bit of a noise when we were going through the barrel portion. And I had thought that we would say like don't open up that barrel. You know what I mean? Like, because I don't know that I would like it. And actually, I wanted to look up what hunting season they would be in New Hampshire at that time,
right?
To actually verify that it was an actual hunting season, because part of me thought, well, is this strange? Because in some cases you do have the perpetrator of a crime is actually the person that will later report
right that they found
the body. And so it was actually hunting season, but it seemed a little strange to me that these guys are just out and they're like, oh,
we found a barrel.
Check out that barrel over there. Let's go Let's go pop that baby open and see what's inside.
Well, and I think what's weird about that is that there are cars just around. There's old cars. There's trash. So it's not like it's just like this middle of a field and there's a barrel and we should open it. And like it's kind of odd that they decided we're going to open it, but that's creepy enough. And then imagine being the chief of police in this small community and you're going, okay, now we got these 2 victims. And, I think it becomes more horrendous because one is a child but then you can't even start really the investigation because you can't even figure out who they are. I mean, there's so many different levels of horror here.
And I actually came across an interview with one of the brothers, one of the hunters that was out there that day that discovered the barrel. And this is many years after the fact. And they had said that they got like some form of PTSD from finding this thing. That these guys were like avid outdoor guys. They were always hunting, and they found this thing, and it really affected them big time.
Well, there's some things you can't unsee.
Yeah, and the one brother said, he said, I didn't return to the woods or to a wooded area for almost 10 years because it just kind of. He's like, I got afraid of what I might see out there or what I might find or who might be out lurking in the woods.
Well, and if you think with avid hunters that there's possibly, the hunters would have to deal with, carcasses of animals. So maybe they wouldn't be as affected by this, but it probably takes on a whole different meaning or a whole different there's some psychological thing there where this is human remains. This is not a deer.
Yeah. And you're right. It's something you can't unsee. It's probably something that unfortunately creeps into your dreams at night over and over again.
So they make this discovery in 1985 and the leads are going dead. They're, everything's a dead end. And it seems like we're going to have to chalk it up and put it to the side and just say, we don't even know who these victims are. We don't even know what to do with this case. And this is just going to become cold.
Yeah, and you can tell by some of those leads that they were following that it appears that I bet you these investigators thought several times that they had this thing solved, or at least had placed names to these remains. And unfortunately, they were never able to do so. And actually, not only that, the bad part here, though, is they end up learning nothing new about the female victims throughout the course of this investigation. And I really do think they tried everything that they could think of. From checking out, they started doing other things too, where they were checking elementary schools in New Hampshire. They're going to go out and look for a situation where maybe there is a girl that was attending school one day and no longer was attending the next day.
Right. And for whatever reason, just wasn't reported missing or the paperwork didn't get filed or something.
The other thing that they did, and this sounds extremely tedious to me, they were checking medical records for every person that was listed as missing or persons that they could find medical records for from everywhere from basically Cape Cod all the way out to California. And they find nothing in this as well. I mean, think about how long of a process that has to be.
That's a task that I'd give you to do. 'Cause I don't think I'd want to do that.
So after the case goes cold, we have a new person enter the story. And this is in 2000. There's a state police sergeant. His name is John Cody.
And so 15 years later.
Yes, he was assigned to take over the case. So back then, the state of New Hampshire did not have a cold case unit. So what they would do is that state troopers would be assigned old cases. You put fresh eyes to an old case. So John Cody...
Might have been a little bit of fun for the state troopers.
Yeah,
they're doing more like, footwork.
Investigative type work. So John Cody, he decides that he is going to go down to the site where the bodies and the barrel were found. He wants to see the location for himself and see if he can search out and maybe find some clues. I mean, it seems like a fruitless effort to me because it's 15 years later, but I don't know what the things that John Cody knows. And who knows what he thinks he could find.
Well, I don't think it's fruitless on the fact that we mentioned, it's almost a little bit of a junkyard down there. So, yeah. I mean, there's possible clues around every corner.
This is on May 9th, 2000. Officer Cody goes to the location of the privately owned wooded lot that is near the trailer. This is near a trailer park, and it's also on the outskirts of the Bear Brook State Park. So this is where the story is going to take a very strange twist. While Officer Cody is examining the area, he located another barrel. This one is approximately 100 yards from where the first barrel was found.
Mm-hmm.
So just about a football field away from where he found the first barrel. So we have this situation here, Captain, right? We have the cold case state trooper. He's out there checking out this area.
Mm-hmm.
He knows what was found in 1985.
Right.
He's fully aware. He's on the investigation. And he's out there and he spots an identical barrel.
And he knows what was found in the barrel.
Yeah. And
so now we have a similar barrel not that far away. But again, it's been 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, there's, the other question is, as you're searching this area, do you see any other kind of barrels and containers? You probably see a bunch of stuff. But this is very similar. And he's probably been looking at these pictures for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And so what's going through his mind at that time?
Yeah. Well, I would guess that he's probably hoping to find clothing or maybe some type of murder weapon, or he's probably thinking that may have been other things that were dumped at that same site along with those two first victims.
And this is different than when the hunters found the barrel, because the hunters find a barrel and it's like, well, you could open it up. It could be anything.
Mm-hmm.
But now you're in a situation as the detective where there's kind of two possibilities. It's nothing or it's more of the same.
Or it could be evidence towards the first victims that were found.
Right. This could be the smoking gun.
Mm-hmm.
The big question would be, do you open up this barrel?
That, of course, is the big question. But one question that he must be asking himself, too, is, was this something that was searched in 1985? How much of this land and things on the land were searched in 1985?
Yeah, maybe they missed something.
Mm-hmm. Let's get into that right after this beer break. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Do you look forward to the holidays? Maybe you struggle with seasonal blues. This time of year can be a lot, and it's natural to feel some sadness or even anxiety about it. But adding something new and positive to your life can counteract some of those feelings. Therapy can be a bright spot, something to look forward to make you feel grounded, and to give you the tools to manage everything going on. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Find your bright spot this season with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/garage today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/garage.
Rosetta Stone is the language learning program with a lasting impact. I've been using their app to learn French, and it's not just about memorizing words, but actually having real conversations. And it's not just French. They offer 25 languages. Right now, Rosetta Stone has an awesome holiday deal, 50% off their lifetime membership. Every language, unlimited access forever. For anyone keen on diving deep into a new language, check out rosettastone.com. It's a game changer.
Major phone carriers make you sign contracts with rigid data plans to trap you into a kind of forced phonogamy. Sounds pretty insecure if you ask me. At Consumer Cellular, we believe in a more consensual and healthy form of phonogamy, free of contracts and more flexible to your data needs. This way, you stick around not because we force you to with contracts and fees, but because you love our phone plans. Like ardently love our phone plans. Phonogamously. Consumer Cellular. When freedom calls, we're here to answer. Call us at 1-888-FREEDOM.
All right, and we're back. Cheers, everybody.
So in 1985, two hunters discovered this first barrel with two sets of remains in it. And now we have this situation in 2000 where Police Sergeant John Cody is back at the scene and he's looking for clues and scoping out the area. What he discovers while he's there is he finds a second barrel. Opening it up, looking for clues, unfortunately what he does find inside is
the sets of 2 more remains.
Now the question becomes, is this just a dumping ground, or is this connected to the first barrel?
Yeah, and what they find inside is, again, these are dismembered remains, wrapped in plastic, and these people were disposed of like trash, just like the first 2. But again, we have a situation here where these are 2 unidentified bodies. What they do learn and what they now know is as follows. The remains found were that of 2 young girls, both younger than the girl that was found with the woman in 1985. Mm-hmm. So we will call these 2 victims, victim number 3 and victim number 4. Victim number 3, or what some would call the middle child, is, well, this is because she is younger than victim number 2, the girl found in 1985, and she is older than the girl that she is found with in 2000. Mm-hmm. She is believed to be 2 to 4 years of age. She is listed at 3 foot 10 inches tall. Weight unknown. She had wavy brown hair and a pronounced overbite. She is listed as UP number 2175 on NamUs. Now, victim number 4 is the youngest of all of the victims. She is believed to be 1 to 3 years of age, 2 foot 5 inches tall. Her weight, too, is unknown, and she had blonde, wavy hair. She had a large gap in her upper front teeth, and she is listed as UP number 2176 on NamUs. Both of these girls were Caucasian. They, just like the first 2 victims, were believed to have been bludgeoned, and they were again dismembered.
100% Caucasian?
Well, we'll get into that. The single steel casket idea is going to pay off a bit because in 2000, after the discovery of the new body barrel, this led to the exhumation of the woman and child found in 1985. This, of course, is going to be for multiple reasons, but one of the things that they really want to do here is to set up a DNA comparison. Okay, so here is what we have learned from the DNA testing. The testing found that the woman was biologically related to the oldest child. This is victim number 2, the girl that was found with the woman. Mm-hmm. It is also determined that the woman was biologically related to the youngest girl found, this being victim number 4.
Yeah, the baby.
So victim 1 is biologically related to victims 2 and 4. I believe when DNA was not so advanced originally, they could prove that the woman was related in the sense that she was either the mother, the aunt, or possibly a sister to victims 2 and 4. Of course, science gets better, and then they are later able to determine with further testing that she is, in fact, maternally related to victims 2 and 4. So she is the mother. Now, we have this weird thing here, though, because there are all these people, but who is this unrelated middle child? Victim number 3 is not maternally related to victim number 1, but there is a possibility at the time that she is related to the other girl victims, meaning that she could have possibly the same father or maybe some more distant type relative to the 2.
Right.
So they can't say that she is related to the other girl victims for sure, but they also cannot officially rule that out.
With knowing the ages of these victims, does that kind of pinpoint a time of when they were actually murdered?
Yes, and this is kind of weird to me because this is what the investigators are able to say, and this is their statement as being, and quote, all 4 victims were killed between 1980 and 1985 and possibly as early as 1977. Right. Can't you kind of see the press conference right there and that being delivered?
Between 80 and 85, but maybe 77.
So let's touch on something real quick here. The first 2 victims were described as having been found in trash bags inside the 55-gallon barrel. Mm-hmm. Victims 3 and 4 were described as having been found in plastic inside of the second 55-gallon barrel. But what I did find later was a statement where an officer says, we believe this plastic to be trash bags as well, matching the trash bags from the first barrel. So maybe that's their connection. So most likely, I'm guessing after sitting there for an additional 15 years, just like, the bodies were far more decomposed than the first 2, these trash bags could have either been cut up or maybe they deteriorated over time as well. And I know that might sound dumb because, we're told that plastic does not break down. And that is pretty much true, but there are a few types of bacteria that will, in fact, break down plastic. Also, there's this thing that happens with sunlight over time that can create a situation that will eventually begin to break down plastic.
Did the murders take place somewhere? And then were they put into bags, transported, and just maybe happen to find, happenstance that they happen to find these barrels? Mm-hmm. Because you're talking about a 55-gallon barrel. They're probably somewhat weight to them. Yeah. So, or did the murders take place somewhere else and then put in the barrels and then transported to the scene in the barrels?
Those are all very good questions. And one theory that locals have brought up was that locals thought that this would have been somebody that would have been local to the area or knew the area. Right. Because the area where these barrels were found is not like easily accessible from the highway or anything like that. It's not like somebody just pulled over and dumped these things out and kept on going.
And then you have the other issue, because we talked about the trailer park that was close. Mm-hmm. The one of the issues there is, it is the 80s, late 70s, early 80s, and what kind of records were kept on rentals there. Yeah. Or, somebody could have been renting, and who would know when somebody's coming and going.
Or possibly somebody just shacked up with somebody for a brief period of time and weren't technically listed as a tenant.
Right, on the lease, yeah.
So we have this very weird situation, right, Captain? We have 4 victims.
Well, I don't even think, it's weird, but I think it's gruesome. I mean, we got 4 bodies that were mutilated and put into a barrel, into 2 separate barrels.
All with unknown identities. But even more strange, there is one, there is not even anybody listed in any database that matches this criteria. You would think that with the advancement of DNA and all of the items that were collected, that you would know something about these victims. And that maybe you would have a young mother with 2 children listed in some database somewhere that you could link to at least 3 of the 4 victims, right?
Right. You have a mother of 2, and you'd think that somebody at some point would come forward and say, that's possibly mine. Possibly my daughter. Mm-hmm. It's almost like these 4 victims are the forgotten.
It's conceivable that if you could identify any of these victims, that you would have some kind of leads to go off of. But then you have this other girl victim that is not related to the others. That you would think you would have a situation where you have this woman and her 2 kids were last seen here, or they were last living here.
Right, and if we could identify her. Right, or if we could identify any of them, then the question for me would be asking the family, why didn't you report her missing? Mm-hmm. Right? Was she not your favorite daughter? So you just figured out she went off and with somebody. And look, I know it's a different time, late 70s, early 80s. It's a different time. There was a lot of times that people, like I said, they ran away from their abusive husbands. Rightfully so, right?
Right, but people still reported children as missing, and I get what you're saying. It is a little more believable that a mother and a couple of kids possibly go missing and something tragic happened to them. Mm-hmm. But then you throw this whole wrench in the thing where you have this unidentified 3rd girl who's not related to the others, and so it's weird to have a situation where you basically have most of one family disappear, something tragic happened to them, not reported missing, and then on top of that, they're linked to this other victim who's not reported missing as well.
Right, that's what flipping blows my mind. You know what I mean? It's like, if this was your sister, you'd report her missing. Mm-hmm. Right? If this was your girlfriend, you'd report her missing, unless you're the one that put her in these barrels, right? Mm-hmm. But still, or maybe this person was an orphan. Maybe this girl didn't have family members. Mm-hmm. Maybe she was a runaway. The thing that bothers me too on this is, what if the girl, okay, just go down on this little rabbit hole with me. Mm-hmm. But what if this girl was actually abducted, in the 60s?
Right.
And that she was reported missing in the 60s. And this person was groomed or was captive.
Oh, like a J.C. Dugard situation where you take somebody captive and you keep them as a family member or keep them in your home, right, and then father children with them.
Right, and so now you have these 2 children, right? Mm-hmm. And we know that they're connected to the oldest victim. But we have no record of them going missing.
Yeah.
So as much as I there's a part of me that doesn't want to believe that look, we all have douchey family members, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
do you want me to list mine?
I don't think we have enough time on this show. Met some of his family members, not the best of people. But it seems unlikely to me that nobody would report this girl missing.
Yeah, and you're doing exactly what everybody does once they review the victim list here. Your mind starts to run wild and you try to make sense of this whole situation. You kind of start to come up with your own stories. Was this middle child somebody that the mother was babysitting? Or was this an adopted kid?
Or was it a kid that she was forced to take care of?
Mm-hmm.
Some psycho kidnapped her when she was a kid or a teenager. And that's what they should really be diving into.
Were these people living with somebody? Were they living with a man that did this to them? And was this man potentially
not living, but I would assume they were captive. They were captured by this guy. They were kidnapped. This girl was kidnapped, and then she was probably forced to have these children. And now there's this other child, and she is having to raise that child as well.
Yeah, so there's a question of where is the father? Why didn't he report anybody missing? But the other thing, too, is then you have a situation where there has to be another mother involved in this inner circle of victims that didn't report anybody missing, too. So what we end up here with is a few answers as far as the DNA testing goes in their findings in 2000, but we ultimately just get a whole bunch of more questions.
Well, and the other thing that they're able to do with the DNA is to do the DNA profile pics, where they can take and make an image of the person based off of DNA.
Yeah, and that advances some of the sketches that were released from 1985. They further advance them and put more likelihood and more likeness to those sketches in 2000.
And the middle child, which we don't know if she is related or not, we can't rule that out. But to me, she looks like possibly Filipino or possibly some kind of Asian descent.
Yeah, and there are some differences in her look compared to the others. Let's step aside, though, and go into some suspects. Because in 2000, they did start coming up with some suspicious people here. The New Hampshire State Police started to look at a serial killer. His name was John Edward Robinson, being a suspect in this case. Now, this does make some sense here because John Robinson was apprehended in June of 2000. So less than 1 month after the discovery of the second body barrel, he's apprehended. And we see this happen a lot where police apprehend a serial killer. And in some cases, if not most cases, they can be unaware that they even have a serial killer running around at all.
Right.
And then they arrest someone for an individual murder. And then they quickly become aware that, hey, this guy's a serial killer. And sometimes that means, okay, well, now we need to figure out this guy's movements.
Was this his first arrest? I mean, was he in jail during the times where these barrels possibly would have been dumped?
No, he would have been out. And, they want to figure out all the places that he would have lived, all the places that he would have worked. Does he travel for work? Does he travel a lot for fun? All of these things, because it always raises the question, if this guy was capable of killing a handful of people here, he's probably capable of killing people elsewhere, of course.
What was his typical victim?
Well, that's the thing. And that's why I think that they looked at him. So Robinson was suspected of having killed 8 or more people in more than one state. They have linked him to deaths in Kansas and Missouri. But the thing that I think landed him on the suspect list was that he had a similar MO that would fit this case. Robinson had been known to prey upon single mothers, and in some cases he was able to convince, or at least attempted to try to convince, the victims' families, the mom and dad of the single mother, that the victim had moved away of their own will, making it look like, he had written letters and sent them to moms and dads stating that the mother had taken a job elsewhere in another state.
What a piece of work.
She was doing well. She didn't intend to move back. So these parents have their daughter who's actually been out and been murdered, and they think that she's off and fine. And so therefore she's not reported as missing.
Yeah. Note to self, if some dope writes you a letter saying, hey, your daughter's with me and she's fine. She just don't want to come home anymore. That guy's a dope. Don't listen to him, and do your due diligence.
Well, just to go into how manipulative this guy was, okay, there was a situation where he had killed a mother, and he had convinced her family that she had moved away, and he needed to get rid of the lady's kid. So what he did was he set up some fake adoption and adopted the kid out to some other couple. The only good thing here is that these people thought it was a legit adoption. They weren't like some weirdos looking to illegally adopt a kid.
Well, and it's a very good thing that he didn't kill the kid. You know,
Yeah, and that shows you why his MO matches this type of case. You know, they're looking for somebody that could make people disappear, go unreported. He is eventually ruled out of this case. I'm guessing that they're able to figure out that he would not have been in the area at the time of when they think that these barrels were placed there.
I'll post a couple of his pictures online. I mean, this guy is definitely a creepy looking dude. Has his giant glasses, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one of the things they call him, or refer to him as, Robinson, they refer to him as the internet's first serial killer, because later in his killing career, he started using chat rooms to hook up with these victims.
This other site also says they call him the internet slave master.
Mm-hmm.
He's a creepy dude. I mean, this is El Creepo.
This situation, though, definitely fits a lot of theories that were going around at the time. Of course, one of the theories was that this would be the work of a serial killer, or maybe even possibly an organized crime member, because we've seen throughout time that organized crime members seem to be pretty good at disposing of bodies. Some have believed that the killer was someone local. We discussed that because of the highway situation and it being an area that wouldn't be familiar to people outside of the town. And of course, there's also the theory, which is a very plausible theory in my opinion, is that the victims could have been killed by a boyfriend or a husband.
So starting in 1985, this case quickly became a cold case, and then it gets reopened in 2000.
Yeah.
But then, now it's 2017. It's since have gone cold again.
Mm-hmm.
But we've noticed with a lot of these cold cases and a lot of these armchair detectives, as we're trying to be, I guess, or support the true crime community, that people kind of get their pet cases.
Yeah.
That they keep researching. And I know, I believe our Facebook girl, Aurelia, actually is really into this case.
Yeah, there are a lot of people out there that have followed this for the entirety of the case. We want to give a quick shout out to some very cool people that have worked very hard on this case. If you watch some of the police press conferences, you'll hear the investigators say that they've been working with agencies in other states.
Right.
And sometimes they mention that they've been working with a local lady or local amateur investigator. And I actually believe that they are talking about New Hampshire residents Rhonda Randall and Scott Maxwell. This is a brother and sister amateur investigative pair, and they have spent a minimum of 40 hours a week on this case for the past 5 years.
Wow.
So in doing our work...
that's a lot of dedication.
Yeah. It's amazing. I don't know how they have the means to do that, but they've put in a lot of hard work on this case. So in doing our research for this case... we used some of their hard work as a primary source for us, as well as the local agencies as well. There have been many great groups involved in this investigation, but I wanted to make sure that we included Rhonda and Scott because I feel like they have been a great source and a very positive force in this investigation, and they often get left out when police and media are, kind of rolling through their credits.
Well, cheers to them.
Yeah.
What's their major theory?
They have a few theories that they review, and we won't have to go all the way into every one of them because you can kind of get the gist of each.
Just put your toe into the rabbit hole.
Yeah, so let's go. This first theory here is the drunken rage theory. So this theory is
sounds like
the captain throwing a beer bottle at the garage wall.
That is not true. That
never happened.
Maybe once.
Maybe last week. So the drunken rage theory is the woman with the two kids is living in some sort of relationship with a man and a kid. And in a drunken rage, he ends up killing them all. This is pretty much similar to the theory that is out there from before, that they established that the mid-child is not linked to the woman, this being victim number 1. This is just like the family annihilator theory, that a man annihilated his entire family. He either A, then committed suicide, or B, moved away and assumed a new identity, not reporting anybody as missing, obviously. There's also the sexual predator theory. This is that a sexual predator offers a needy family a place to stay and eventually molests or attempts to molest the children and then kills to cover up this crime.
Mm-hmm.
There is also the woman on the run theory, which is kind of a two-parter. So
yeah, we kind of brought that up, a battered wife.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the thought here that a woman on the run with her 2 children runs into a situation that ends up being even more worse than what the situation she's running from, or a person they are running from catches up to them at some point. But as you can see, the mid-child, the one that's not connected to the woman, victim number 1, this mid-child throws a big wrench in a lot of these different theories and certainly adds a variable that is not easily explained.
Rhonda and Scott, they uncovered some stuff that just doesn't seem like a law enforcement uncovered about the owner of the private property.
Yeah, remember we had said that the barrels were actually found on private property that backs up to the state park.
Right.
So the landowner's name is Robert Callahan, and Callahan lived on the land during some of the time that these barrels could have been placed there. So the thing here is, though, that Callahan spent time at the New Hampshire State Prison. This would be from 1991 until 1996. He was in there
after the first barrel was found.
And he was in there for sexual assault of a minor.
Oh, his red flag.
And they revealed his court transcripts to figure out exactly what this means. They didn't go into specifics, but regarding those transcripts, they were able to determine that during the course of that trial, he admitted to molesting both girls and boys over a period of time. The other thing to consider here is the trailer park that is nearby. You brought up the trailer park about possible people living there,
right?
People that might have been listed or not listed as living there. And I do want to say something that I heard from a now famous Ohio detective who turned author. And I'm not going to say her name because I'm not sure how many people she intended for this statement to be heard by. But she had once said that in some of these trailer parks, you can't swing a bat without hitting a sexual predator, which makes you think, it.
Well, note to self, I'm not going to be living in a trailer park then.
And I'm moving out of mine immediately.
Yeah, we're going to have to move the garage out of our trailer park. Yeah, but you would think because of the codes now where you have to register and you can't be a certain distance. Yeah, stuff like that.
Times have certainly changed, and that's one thing that we see in this investigation as it goes on. Throughout the years, anytime technological advancements were made and could provide additional investigative tools, the New Hampshire State Police and the FBI, they took advantage of new technology by applying it to this case, running the necessary test and putting it to work.
Yeah, the FBI doesn't mess around.
Well, they did this thing. This is some weird stuff here.
And I would just like to say, it's to me, just because of what happened with the case in Grove City and the Columbus case, and then the case that's happening right now, the Delphi murders in Indiana, and now I believe the FBI is involved in that. You see now with more modern cases, because of technology, that when the FBI gets involved, it gets solved quickly. And so it's fascinating to me that the FBI has been involved in this case, and they're not any further along.
Well, and the thing is, and this is my understanding here, Captain, I could be completely off base, but my understanding is for the FBI to get involved in a case, there has to actually be a break in a federal crime. Somebody has to break a federal law. Now, one bit of a
murder is not...
Well, but that's technically investigated by a state.
Right.
So, but the loophole in that situation is kidnapping is considered a federal crime.
Right.
And therefore, one could argue that even if you are even being held captive for a second or two before you're murdered, that's technically kidnapping. Anytime a person is somewhere where they don't want to be is technically kidnapping, according to the definition.
So, like, if you're at your job, you don't want to be there.
Well,
can I call? My boss is keeping me here.
You might be stretching.
I just want to go to the garage and have a couple beers.
Let's talk about this isotope testing, because this is some weird stuff.
Isotope?
Yes, isotope. So basically, due to chemicals and pollutants that are in our environment, and I'm sure there are several other things that I don't understand nor could I explain that are involved, but they can determine where someone may have lived basically by determining where they wouldn't have lived.
Right.
Does that make sense? And I think a lot of this has to do with drinking water. And so here's the situation, right? They do this isotope testing. So for victim 1 and her 2 children, this would be, victim 2 and victim 4, they have a map of the United States showing that she could have been from the Northeast, and there is some of the Midwest on there and some of the West Coast as well. Mm-hmm. But it basically, which sounds like I just named the entire United States.
Yeah, you basically pulled the, they were probably dumped or probably murdered between 80, 85, maybe 76.
So the thing here is, though, when you look at the map, it really does eliminate a good 2/3, maybe 3/4 of the United States. Mm-hmm. So it does narrow it down quite a bit. They do have a separate map containing some of the same testing results, this being for the third girl, victim number 3. And the areas where she could have lived or been from closely resemble that of the other victims. However, the places she could have lived in the Northeast are a lot smaller. So some very interesting stuff here.
Right. So you basically make a circle of one, make a circle of the other, and then there's probably going to be a section that's overlapping. And then you can really kind of focus there. Mm-hmm.
And the other thing we see is, like you touched on, the advancement as far as the facial reconstructions go for the 4 victims, which have changed quite a bit over the years as well. Again, this is due to advancements in technology. The most obvious in this situation would be victim number 1. Remember, we said that she was missing some of her teeth?
Right.
Well, that changed her appearance greatly because eventually they were able to put together a facial reconstruction with what she would have looked like with teeth. Of course, this changes the appearance of the lower half of one's face almost entirely.
Yeah, and originally we have evidence of blunt force trauma to the victims' heads, but the law enforcement is able to shine a little more light on possibly what happened to these victims.
Yeah, and that's something that I really question here, because one thing that I've noticed that have changed in the presentation of this investigation in the last few years is that regarding the 2 younger girls, they originally stated that they shared the same cause of death as the 2 older victims, which we said originally was listed as being bludgeoned. But to be more precise, like the captain said, it's actually blunt force trauma to their heads. Now, the reason why I question this is I'm not certain if this was something that they weren't making well known at the time or throughout the years, or if it was something that they actually had to scientifically reconstruct and have to spend a whole bunch of time on this situation to determine that was in fact the situation. I mean, we have something that's very hard to investigate, first of all, when you don't know the victims and their names, but on top of that, you have dismembered bodies that are found in these barrels that create all kinds of problems when you're trying to forensically put this back together.
Well, right, and then this case really spans over 20 years, and so the advancement of technology, you would think that you'd be leaps and bounds above where you were at on doing an autopsy. Mm-hmm. Even if you don't think that the original autopsies were bad, it makes a lot of sense to go back and do them again. I mean, back in 85, most houses didn't have computers. Now people were walking around with computers in their pockets or on their watches.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I wonder if some of those autopsies contained speculation in them. I know that it's supposed to just be reported fact. However, if you cannot make a proper determination, you can leave what would be called an expert opinion. Now, when you exhume those bodies many years later, again, advancements in technology, maybe they're able to actually determine that this is it.
What a frustrating case for law enforcement, because not only you're trying to figure out what happened to these individuals, then you're also trying to find who is responsible for this, but you can't even get the first part together. You can't even figure out who the actual victims are. And this goes on, like we said, we're going on almost
over 30 years now.
Yeah.
And it's not for
time.
the lack of not trying, right? I mean, we see the efforts that are being put forth.
Efforts and multiple decades.
Yeah, by several agencies, by multiple states, even armchair, amateur sleuths getting involved. This is a case for a case where you don't have the identities of the victims. This is a case that's huge, and it's spanned over across the USA. Looking for these people in every state, medical records, elementary schools, everything that they could do. You have the first barrel in 1985, then the second barrel in 2000, and if that's not strange enough, none of this leads to answers.
Yeah, but this case is going to take a twist in 2017.
Yeah, this thing's going to bust wide open. But I do,
and we'll get to that tomorrow.
Yeah, because we're running out of time here. But I do have to throw this out here, Captain. This is one of the strangest cases I've ever read about. It might be the strangest case that we've reviewed so far, and we've reviewed some very strange and odd cases.
And yeah, and we'll dive into that tomorrow. And we'll dive into that tomorrow. I want to thank everybody for all the feedback on the Brandon Lawson case. I did take it to some buddies of mine. Everybody was asking for an update. I did take it to some of my audio engineering buddies to look at. We just couldn't really come up with anything clearer on
than what we found here.
Right. So we're just kind of stuck at this point. Maybe as technology gets more advanced in that case, that will help us out with that 911 call.
If you are looking for an update, you can go to our website, truecrimegarage.com. There are a lot of people that have posted things that they think that they're hearing, what Brandon is saying, as well as theories that they think that's going on. And interesting enough to me, a lot of the people chiming in seem to be from Texas that are able to offer a little more insight as to the area that case took place.
And make sure you subscribe to the show. Make sure you tell a friend, and we'll see you guys here tomorrow.
Until tomorrow, everybody be good, be kind, and don't litter.
You can live out your MasterChef dreams when you find a professional on Angie to tackle your dream kitchen remodel. Connect with skilled professionals to get all your home projects done well. Visit Angie.com. You can do this when you Angie that.